there, gang! Looks like we made it! It is Thursday, just before the July 4th, and that means we are all at the approach of a much-deserved little vacation. I have no big plans or anything, really, but I'm looking forward to resting my eyes a little bit and doing some writing, so I'm really thrilled about that. And as a means of a little celebration, I wanted to put together another little video that I've been planning for a while. I hope you don't mind the rapid output that's been coming out in the past few weeks, but if you have a lot of ideas, then yeah, store them somewhere. So you'll be subject to that. So today, I actually wanted to explain something that is very special to me, and that is my one single tattoo that I have. It's going to be a little awkward to show you because if I raise my arm up, it's going to be upside down and a little bit at a slant angle, but here it is, right there. But obviously if I have my arm down, it'll be right side up. You see, kind of like that. But there's a really fascinating story that coincides with that. Several stories, really. So let me roll it back first. Ever since I was a kid, I could trace roots all the way back to maybe elementary school. I had a very interesting obsession with symbols. Icons, designs, objects that represent some sort of faculty or a person or a group. And the interesting thing about that is growing up, and I take great pride in the way that I was brought up, I wasn't necessarily taught of any specific faith. I wasn't part of any political group. I barely had a friend group. So I was seeing all these symbols kind of just floating around me, but there was never one that was for me, that belonged to me, that I was brought up with. But I wanted some symbol, colors, a unique design that I could use as my stamp whenever I do something meaningful, whenever I come up with something that's important to me. So I guess that's why I was so interested in symbols growing up. But of course I didn't come to that realization until much later in life, let alone in recent years. But my very first symbol, if I'm to call it that, for lack of a better term, I developed in elementary school, and I drew it by hand on my DSi XL. And I still have record of it. I'll show you an image right here. That was my original insignia. That is actually not the original look for it. Of course, I drew it all over the place as well. The original design, which unfortunately no longer exists, it was yellow with green eyes and a sharp grin with rectangular teeth. But the next stage of that, the more prominent one that I have record of, is split right down the middle, black and red, my two favorite colors, as you probably know by now, and the eyes also correlated with that color palette, and I sharpened the teeth. So that icon I had with me from, I think, late elementary school all the way to perhaps the end of high school. That ran for a very long time. So I used that to kind of just stamp my work. Also when I was very, very camera shy when I was younger, let alone only a few years ago, before I started all my various YouTube channels, I always used that as a profile image. So moving it along to college, of course, very different life at this point, I actually came up with a brand new design, and this was a total accident. It was just happenstance. I had relief printmaking as an elective, and I really loved that class. It was really fun. I made some really cool pieces there, which unfortunately I do not have on hand right now. They're somewhere. But one of our first projects as a warm-up to test the tools for the first time was to create a logo to sort of stamp onto our work, future projects that we'd make, that represents us without necessarily just writing out our name, you know what I mean? And with relief printmaking, because it's really interesting, because whatever you carve into the material that we were carving into, once you stamp it onto the paper, whatever you carved, it will be in reverse. So it was very important to me that whatever I traced in, I would have to make it symmetrical. So that way, when it goes down, it's not going to be the reverse of a design I had. In this case, it would hardly matter. So that resulted in this little number. This is my second icon, which lasted for all throughout college. I'd say perhaps from freshman year to the very end, maybe sophomore year. Again, I got a bachelor's, so I was in college for 4 years, from 2017 to 2021, as some of you already know. So that was the second insignia, and that carried on from into graduation, and then a little bit until post-graduation. And then something interesting happened when it came to my third insignia, and that's one that I've got tattooed on my arm. This is a really fascinating story, and before I continue, let me go grab something. I'll be right back. Before 2021 happened, as you all know, there was a certain event that affected a great deal of the planet, and as a result of that, we were all required to wear masks for a considerably long time, which I was fine with. You know me, I freaking love masks, so I had no qualms about that whatsoever. And I still have my original mask here. I promise you this is relevant. This is what I call my Night Watcher mask. Might sound familiar, but I've had this mask since before the plague, if you call it that. It was just a rag, very unrefined. I ordered it off the Facebook Marketplace, which I'd never do it again. But I loved it so much, I actually, when quarantine hit, I cut it up and I sewed it down to a stronger mask, and I've had it ever since. I still wear it during winter or when it's really rainy or there's really crazy weather out there, so I still have it. But during quarantine times, when I was, this is how the third icon came to be, I'd go in to get my hair cut. I'd still have to wear the mask, obviously. And what I'd have to do is, obviously, I'd have to remove my glasses, and then I'd put my buddy on. Now, the interesting thing that happened, that I noticed, as I was looking at myself in the mirror, with my vision compromised, as I saw my eyes blend in to the shapes of my mask. And I found that really interesting. It reduced the details, and thus created a more basic conceivable shape. So what I did is when I got back to my apartment, I looked into my own bathroom mirror and I recreated exactly what I saw. I removed my glasses, I put on the mask, looked in the mirror, and I held out a notepad and drew the shape that I looked at. I tweaked it a little bit, I refined it, accentuated some curves, and then what I did is actually when I had some downtime at my job, I went onto Google Slides, of all things, and within a few hours, this was the result. That is my current symbol. And there are actually two variants of it. The one you just saw, that is the first variant. That's a standard one. But I created a second variant specifically to go on my arm, which has extended teeth, if you may call it that, however you'd like to register it. I really love this symbol. It's very personal to me. It reminds me a lot of a Rorschach test. I think my mother compared it to that once, which I love. I take that in stride. It's also very skull-like, very wolf-like. I really love those themes that it has. And there is some additional iconography hidden inside the icon. But before I get to that, I first want to talk about what the symbol means. I kind of already touched on it. Again, growing up, I kind of was in a place where I didn't necessarily have a core set of beliefs or thoughts or ethics kind of just laid out in front of me when I was a kid, and I wasn't told by anyone, these are the rules that you have to follow. Nothing good or bad about that necessarily, that's just how it was. And for those of you who did grow up with that set of rules, that's pretty cool. You know, get a little bit of a head start, whereas for me, I kind of had to pick and choose what was relevant, what was important, and all of that. But aside from that, I didn't really have any symbols or rules to begin with. And throughout my life, before I ever majored as a philosophy major, it was very imperative that I chose what I believed in, what I thought was important, but also who and what were significant to me, who I should contribute my emotions towards, who I thought would be good friends to have and to keep close, and who I should probably get rid of as well. That's also a big part of it. So I needed a symbol, I felt like, to represent all that. Some people don't need it. In fact, a lot of people don't. But for me, I just needed that iconography that I could just have for me. And that is where this little number came in. This is called the Cult of One. Simply because I did not grow up with, again, any, like, pre-installed mandates, if you'd call it that. I didn't have a text. So from there on out, I had to make the choice as to what was significant to me, and I wanted something to represent all of that. Now, the second thing I wanted to bring up is another reason why this symbol is so important. I wanted to translate this into the story that I've been working on. As I told probably many of you throughout my videos, I'm working on a novel called Step Apex Rising, which has been on the back burner as roots going all the way back to middle school. The main character has existed ever since then, and only during the middle of college I started forming a coherent story, a narrative, a setting around him, and that's what this novel's about. This character is called Steppenwolf, and the story is something of a prequel to a short story, but then this story wound up just becoming its own novel. So it's going to have its own very distinct identity. It can totally be separated from the story that came before. And the thing about Steppenwolf, again, this is all a precursor to bigger events that happen in my grand timeline, is that he becomes something of a leader figure within this really dilapidated, terrible, disgusting city. And people start to follow him. And he decides that in order to keep everyone in line, so everyone has a code, everyone has rules, and no one does anything crazy, he establishes a new faith called Examism. So that is what this novel is about, the origins of this man Steppenwolf, who becomes titled the Apex Examist, being the leader of this little faith. And then this story ultimately ends with his faith being born, and then I could have sequel potential. So I'm not even thinking that far. That's just where that's the end game for the novel right now. I'm not getting too spoilery either. I mean, it's in the title, Step Apex Rising. It's kind of a few cute little puns to be found in there, which I really like. So I wanted to implement the Cult of One symbol that I have on my arm into the novel itself. So the way I'm thinking about it is, in this particular story, he's going to have some followers, and the thing about him is people draw from his appearance. He wears a mask to suppress supernatural abilities he has. He wears a cape to protect himself from fire, and he wears a biker suit to keep himself protected. But when people start looking up to him, they see every part of his aesthetic as iconography, and they use that as leverage to sort of start that group, even though he wasn't planning on that at all. So as a result of that, one of his followers named Grave Wills creates this symbol, or at least pioneers it. So what he does is he and his little insurgency, they graffiti the outside thickest lines of this icon. So it's just simply a loop, and it loops back in, and it goes straight down. And then you just have those graffiti mess up lines probably plastered all over the city, and there's more of them as the story progresses. But beyond Step Apex Rising, the religion gets more refined, as does the symbol itself. So it becomes more crisp, the lines are more clean, the edges are more sharp, and the space between those two lines becomes more detailed. So you get more of the fangs, the teeth, as I like to call it. You also get a semblance of a nose to create that face. And then decades pass, going way deep into the lore, stories I'm not even prepared to tackle in writing completion. The Apex Examist, formerly known as Steppenwolf, he becomes married. There is a ghost who is able to project her spirit onto the earth, named Candace. Name might be familiar if you've been following my videos. So they elope, and they ultimately become two Apex Examists. They're both leading the Examist Union simultaneously. So the original Apex Examist, he's titled in the annals of history as Apex Prime, whereas his wife Candace becomes Apex Phantom. So they're working together. And that leads into the final evolution of this icon. And I'm not even going to bother showing you on my arm, because that's going to be tough, so I'm just going to re-relay the image on the screen again. You'll notice at the very top, between the two eyes, there's this little winged-looking symbol, very symmetrical like everything else. That symbol has appeared before this icon, the Cult of One, was ever designed. That is called the Dove and Falcon insignia, and that is meant to represent the marriage between the two apexes and also their leadership of the Union itself. So I snuck that into the Cult of One to make it all one legacy design, if you will. So that's how it functions in the fictions. It slowly evolves over the decades as it yields more importance, as more story is spilt into it. So I really like it. I like how life went into art in that way. And you could argue the reverse as well, if you consider the pioneering old elements of this story that have been seeking refinement for such a long time. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. This insignia is very important to me. It's the only tattoo I ever plan to get, unless I come up with a better idea. I don't know, maybe I could get the Dove and Falcon logo on my shoulder or something like that. That would be interesting, but then again, you wouldn't be able to see it. I mean, everyone's got different philosophies on like what the meaning of tattoos are, how many you should have, where they're placed. I mean, it's an ancient art, really. But for me, I just need the one, and I just like to have it visible. I like to be able to see it. I think I got it about a year, maybe a year and a half after I moved into my apartment where I currently live. So this tattoo is pretty new. And for those of you who are wondering, oh, what did it feel like? It felt awkward more than it did painful. But they had like a big ass TV playing in the studio where I was getting the tattoo, and I was just watching TV as they were drilling away, and I barely felt anything. It was not bad at all. Actually, you kind of just get numb to it mentally, and you kind of just forget it's happening at all. It also depends on where you're getting it. I think your arm in between your elbow and your wrist is one of the least painful places to get it, because it's mostly just flesh and fat, right? If you're going close to a joint or where bone is really tight, then that's where it's going to hurt. That's what I've gathered, but everyone's pain threshold is different. For me, I was fine. I think it took 4 hours, perhaps, maybe less. And it cost a handsome sum of money, but it's one of the best purchases I've ever made. I'm very proud of it, and it represents years of work, so I don't foresee any time where I'm going to look at it and go, ah, damn, I need to turn this into something else. I need to get it removed of the laser. I love it, and as you've seen, it's been my moniker on many of my creative projects, including this channel. So, yeah, that's the whole story. I wanted to make this video for a long time, just because I thought it's really interesting how it links up so many things we've talked about on this channel. My love for masks, as you know, my story writing, philosophy, it brings all that together, and the little tidbits of my life that I've mentioned before, and vlogs and stuff like that as well. So yeah, whatever you take from this video, hopefully maybe this gives you an idea of, oh, if you've been interested in getting a tattoo, what sort of icon would you like? What would it be encompassing? Don't just get one to get one. At least that's how I feel. Don't just see like, hey, that was a cool movie that I saw like 2 minutes ago. Let me go get a tattoo with the main character. You know, like, I'm very particular. Something has to have intense longevity. It needs to be deeply personal in order for it to be integrated onto my body that I will be operating within for the rest of my life, unless, you know, transcendence becomes a thing. But we'll see what the future holds. But until then, I like this arm, and I'm losing a lot of weight too. So I plan on staying inside here for as long as I can. So expect more. But anyways, that's all I got. Let me know what type of tattoos you have in the comments below, or if you plan on getting one yourself. Go ahead and share. Shout out. So yeah, that's all I got to say. I hope that you found that video fun, and enjoy your 4th tomorrow. Take care.